versus you. It's you 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 versus you. Time to clear your mental, everything you've been through. Looking in the mirror like you're the one with the issues. You against yourself, feel like you against the world. Internally battling all of the trauma, you struggle to manage it. Gotta seek help for the damages. It's you versus you, now go and handle it. It's you versus you, let's get ahead of it. It's you versus you, let's clear our heads of it. I'm so good now, I feel good now. The baggage put down, just let me live. Just let me live. Now my mind's clear. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you.
What's up, everybody? I'm Saquon, man. Welcome back to a fresh episode of the You versus You podcast. Today, we're going to talk about taking aim, right? And by definition, taking aim is to point a weapon or a camera, or more applicable to what we're doing today, an intention at an actual target, right? And we're going to reference Jordan Peterson because he talks a lot about taking aim, the importance, rather, of taking aim at a target in pursuit of life, right? And we're going to talk about how that's a little bit of a crisis because in identity, that is, a crisis in identity, because in order to take aim at a target, it is, in a sense, a death, because you have to relinquish the absolute potentiality of all things and relinquish that for the purposes of pursuing a single thing. And we're also going to unpack a little bit why that's difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people are reluctant to take aim at a pursuit in life. We're going to talk about some of the dissonance in mindset that we may encounter that produces that reality. We're also going to talk about some of the limiting emotions that produce that overall reality. And I'm very, very, very excited to have this conversation because I have a really, really, really dynamic brother here. And I want to shout out my man, my brother, my fan, Leander Adams. We actually did an episode. We talked about consumerism, he and I together. But I met this brother via Lee, and I talked to Lee on the phone. He's like, yo, this is a really dope brother. I think the two of you can get together and produce something really great that a lot of people can glean a lot of insight and inspiration from. And upon first encountering this brother, I immediately felt that. So again, shout out to Lee. This brother, super dynamic, all right? He's the co-owner of the Strategic Scale Institute. He also founded the Strategic Scale Network. And in a few moments, I'm going to allow him to elaborate on that because I think that initiative is absolutely amazing. But without further ado, I'm extremely excited to welcome the good brother Marquel Russell to the show.
Hey man,
Big time.
I'm excited to be here, brother.
Oh man, happy to have you,
I'm excited to be
man.
here.
Yeah. Tell us about the Strategic Network Institute, its overall goal, your premise, mission statement, etc.
For sure. So essentially, I created this strategic. So the first company, one of the first companies we built from one of our first education brands was a company called Klein Attraction University, and that company became an Inc. 5000 company. We built it from scratch, and the whole focus was like helping businesses learn how to acquire clients. Most businesses, if you look at the top 5 reasons businesses go out of business, 4 of them is marketing related. So and I solved the problem for myself first off, and then I started teaching, what I was learning. What I realized, what I thought then was the way to scale a business is to just get more clients, get more sales, make more money. That's how you scale. But in reality, it's 8 pillars that you really need. It's multiple pillars you need to really scale a business that's sellable, profitable. If you want to sell it, if you want to be more profitable, you want to be scalable, you want to be more enjoyable, it's way more than just get more clients. Because if you don't got other systems in place, the business will just implode. So I was like, all right, we want to create a company that's more holistic, that serves the whole CEO instead of just the marketing aspect. So that's where the strategic. And one of my clients was telling me one day, she was like, y'all are so much more than just coaching and just marketing because it's so much more that y'all cover. So that's what led to the Strategic Scale Institute. And the Strategic Scale Network is just like our media arm. Because on the front end, it's just media education for business owners, education. Because I think especially now, man, anybody can kind of get a microphone and go on the internet and start just talking.
Right.
And it's put business owners in a really bad place. So we really want to revolutionize the education space as a whole, the traditional education system with kids and the business education. So we teach obviously adults about how to grow and scale businesses, but I also got something called the Young Millionaires in Training, where we actually teach the youth, entrepreneurship as well. So that's a whole aspect. It's like when it comes to again the traditional education, my kids go to public school, which is great, and I think you get a lot from it going to actual school. But I think a lot of it that they don't teach at school. Number one, a lot of stuff you get from school, they don't technically teach it in the curriculum. It's the other stuff, right? But it's like the other stuff, the underlying stuff that we cover at home with the kids. How do we teach the kids AI? How do we teach them entrepreneurship, financial literacy, personal development, about the brain, the whole 9 yards? So we just want to revolutionize the education system, and we just use business and the portfolio and so forth that we're growing to actually be able to fund that.
Wonderful, man. I think that's an amazing initiative that you have. And you and your team, you guys are pretty big deals. If I understand correctly, you've coached, mentored, helped to scale
Yeah,
over 3,000
yeah, for
businesses.
sure.
Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%,
That's
100%,
amazing,
100%.
man. So kudos to you and everything
Appreciate
that you're doing.
it.
And I love what you're talking about with the children as well,
Mhm.
because like there's a huge differentiating factor in the types of education that's needed to be successful,
Yep.
right? Like Paulo Freire, who's an amazing author, he talks about it in this book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Mm.
He differentiates the two types of education, like depository education, right, where you're just learning a thing
Yeah.
to take some type of standardized test, right, so that you can regurgitate it,
Yeah.
right? But you really don't keep that information,
Mhm.
right?
100%.
After you take that test or the moment that you deem that information is no longer useful,
Mhm.
it's gone out of your immediate recollection or your explicit memory,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to problem pose education, which it sounds like is what you're doing, which I totally applaud, which teaches people how to be critical thinkers.
100%. 100%. I think because a lot of times we're taught what to think, not how to think, right? So it's like, how do you begin to, like, even with our kids, it's like, if we don't begin to teach our kids how to think, they're clueless when they get out in the real world. Like, when you're in these situations, you're like, well, I can't ask mom or I can't ask dad.
Right.
Then it's like, how do I process and come and make my own decisions? Which I think that's one of the reasons why boxing, we was talking about boxing earlier, and when my kids in boxing, it's powerful because now I told them one day, and I was telling Big Lee, shout out to Big Lee, I was like, man, I think boxing is probably one of the, if not the most challenging sport because it's like when you're in there, it's just you and another person for 3 minutes. You can't tag nobody in. You can't call time out. Can't nobody save you. You got to be in there and be able to make solid decisions. How do you move around? How do you do these things? And you making decisions on the fly. So I think thinking is a super underrated skill set. And like you said, we're taught that going to school, memorizing, passing the test is learning, but that ain't really learning. It's just memorization. Learning is like
Absolutely.
how do you apply this stuff, and then when you get data from actually applying it, now you've actually learned.
Absolutely. And I can see how CEOs, people within the structure of the companies that you help,
Mhm.
children that you help, I can immediately see straight away how they benefit immensely from your tutelage and the tutelage of your team.
Appreciate
So
it.
again, man, kudos to you.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your experience that ultimately made you who you are today.
So I always been an entrepreneur, right? I was an entrepreneur before I had a word for it, right? I was a kid knocking on your door asking, "Can I take your trash out?" I was when I was in like high school, middle school. I was played sports, but I was also the dude who had the weed, right? So you know what I'm saying? So
Right.
it was like the only people I knew who had money was dope boys. So my cousin, so I went that route, jumped out in the streets super early. I dropped out of high school in 10th grade, went full time in the streets, and 19 found myself locked up. Had my first son when I was 19, and I met him when I was in jail, right? I met
Mm.
him in visitation. So I got out, said, you know what, I'm gonna do this job thing. My dad went around when I was coming up. Let me do this job thing so I could be in my son's life. That really, I got one of my homies got me a job at Petro on Bankhead. Worked there for like 2 weeks. I was like, this is gonna work. I got a check, took my son to the fair. Certain stuff we couldn't do. I was like, this just ain't my way of operating. So we make it to the streets, and I was like, all right, I took the money I was getting, and I started a record label. So I started taking artists who I knew who rap, who did beats, brought them together, and we started a record label. I just kind of managed it on some like Master P type, Birdman type situation. Let me just bring them together. We work right. So I was in the club one night and I got introduced to network marketing, where you go out, you recruit people into a company, you pay to get in, they pay to get in, you build a team. People call it pyramid scheme. And some of them are legit pyramid schemes. So I went all in on that, and we're not all in at first. I kind of dove into it, but I was still doing my street thing because that was my for sure money. But I started hearing them talk differently. I started hearing about cats. I started listening to cats like Jim Rohn and Dr. Miles Monroe and Tony Robbins, and like I had never heard cats like talk like this before. And I was like, man, they talking about something that I ain't never heard. But I was hooked. So I started learning the marketing stuff like direct response marketing. That's why I'm fascinated with the brain, like you are, because marketing and sales is all neurological, right? So it's like, how do people buy? How do people think? How do people make decisions? What keeps people from making decisions? It's all tied around like their wiring of the brain. So I got really fascinated. Now, mind you, I'm dropped out of high school in 10th grade. Um, I wasn't dumb. I didn't drop out because I was dumb. I dropped out because I was bored. But here I was like fascinated with books and reading and so forth. And I just started teaching what I was learning. And I realized that my gift that I had that God gave me was teaching, taking these complicated concepts and breaking them down so other people can get it. So, because I saw on the internet, it was a lot of people consuming information, but when nobody applying it because people weren't really delivering applicable information. So that's when we started from Klein Trace University. People started asking me to coach them. I didn't know coaching was a thing, so I started coaching and so forth. Because when I started, you see a lot of black kind of teachers and so forth on the internet now, but it wasn't like that 15 years ago. Right, it was very few of us. So I started teaching it. We grew Client Attraction University. That became an Inc. 5000 company. Then we started, like I said, Strategic Scale Institute, which we'll focus on now, where we help the whole holistic business and really help them build companies that are sellable. Even if you don't want to sell it, your company is, more valuable, even if you don't sell it. So that's kind of my whole journey in a nutshell. And I think the biggest the biggest I think thing that's super important is me and you talk is that up until third grade, my aunt raised me, and I thought my aunt was actually my biological mom. And she smoked crack, and we used to eat like MREs. I don't know if you're familiar with MREs in the army and stuff like that. So yeah, so then I met my mom, my biological mom in third grade, and then yeah, I was, and that kind of led me into another side of the drug game because like my whole family always been hustlers, so I just saw it in different ways, and I was like, okay, and I was always observative. So I was like, okay, if I can take this and I can do this and I can, get me some money with it, let's do it. So it was always entrepreneurship. I didn't know it was entrepreneurship. Then when I got into legit business, I was like, oh, the only thing changes, all the skills transfer. The only thing changes is the product, and then they can't take them from you.
Bro, I think that that's amazing. Listening to you unpack that eloquently and descriptively, I might add, descriptively, I heard a few things. One of the things that I'm able to deduce from that is that it seemed like even from a very early age, you had an ironclad mindset,
Mhm,
right? And I sense no crisis of identity whatsoever
mhm,
when it comes to, or when it came to what you wanted, what you were able to do,
mhm.
right? And then there was a huge thing that you were able to differentiate. Like, yo, I'm bored in school. Like
Yeah.
the way that you're teaching me
Mhm,
is not stimulating,
yeah.
right? And I say that because I came to really respect this mental health thing, right?
Mhm,
Obviously, from my own experience and then the subsequent study, I immersed myself into the topic. But in doing that, I developed a fascination, man, because I've seen people throughout my life and even recently, man, people that have taken a victim mindset
mhm,
and allowed, and it's a choice, allowed themselves to become repressed
mhm.
to the point to where they have complete apathy, right? Not in tune, no desire to be in tune with their emotions, so on and so forth,
Yeah.
which makes them kind of inhuman. But I've seen, and then most recently, I've seen regression in my vocation to the point to where people completely check out of life. There's
Mhm,
this person that I saw this week, literally sitting, defecating on themselves. right? Like just completely tuned out of life, have no desire to aim at anything. And I reference that because when we spoke, and you alluded to it a moment ago, indirectly, but when we spoke, you directly said that one of the main things that you teach, right? It's not even necessarily growing the business or being an efficient CEO. You said, I teach mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that.
Because I think so. Business is 90% the inner game, right? That's why we was just nerding out before we started about the different books and so forth. Because it's all about like, how do I? You said something powerful like before we started, and you was like, if you understand the brain and you can actually put a name with it. If you're like, hey, okay, I'm looping right now. Like, oh, that's a loop. It's just taking me back. I'm nerdy on the neuroscience stuff, right? So you're like, all right, why? Okay, I want to. Let's say, for example, businesses come to us because they want to get more clients. One of the first things we see is that they're undercharging. One of the reasons they're undercharging is because how they see themselves, and that's all identity. Like they see other people charging what they want to charge, but they don't believe they believe they can charge it. But they don't believe people will pay them that because it's
Mm,
them. That's all identity. That's all mental work. Some business owners have a really hard time turning off. I know it was for me as well. One of my biggest fears was stopping because I'm like, if I stop, then I could end up back where I was.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? When we was eating MREs and we was eating syrup sandwiches and drinking sugar water. Because your brain is gonna take you to the worst case scenario.
absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, because it wants to protect you. So I'm like, so I can't stop. I gotta grind 24/7. Sleep when I'm dead. All these different things I was hearing, right? So it's like that's all 100% mindset. Once we can begin to uproot that stuff, the charging what you want to charge, the creating the content, to growing a business, that stuff becomes easier. But you got to work through the mental stuff, and then you got to work through it as a CEO because now if you're going to build a team, these individuals are showing up with their own versions of that as well. So yes, you see this person, but you don't see all the other trauma and all the other baggage and everything that they're bringing. So now you got to begin to rewire them in a way as well. And that's all 100% mindset. So the business stuff is it's almost like if you ever see an iceberg,
Hmm.
right? It's almost like you see visibly on top of the water, but the actual iceberg is actually under the water. So you don't really see this whole thing because it's all hidden. And that's just kind of how we show up as well. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, you're talking to this individual, but they snapping or they having a hard time or they're having to protect themselves because all this stuff mentally, they got going on they done dealt with. So you like gotta chip away at all that. Does that make sense?
Not only does it make sense, Marquis, I couldn't have broken that down any better.
I appreciate it.
That is like you hit the nail right on the head. And it's a perfect segue because I want to ask your opinion, or not even opinion. How many times have you encountered this? I want to talk about the critical space. I want to talk about stagnation,
Hmm.
right? But within that stagnation, I want to identify that critical space between idea and execution. And how do you help people shorten that gap, right? And get over that stagnation, if you will?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things is so it was an article on the Harvard Business Review where they talked about like how hard it is to teach smart people, right? So they was literally talking so like people who are like overly educated, um, degrees, all the letters after their name, those individuals are typically the hardest to actually teach because their biggest fear is being wrong because they've been right their whole lives. You know what I'm saying? So my another client of mine, she's a therapist. She calls it the gifted child syndrome, right? And because the gifted child was always great at school, they always got all A's. They freaked out if they got a B. At home, they did everything right. So then when you come into this entrepreneurship world, entrepreneurship is the scientific method. What that means is you have a hypothesis. Here's what I think going to work. Then you actually, then some people say, well, I'm a perfectionist. Perfectionism is just saying I'm scared. It's a fancy way to say I'm scared. So it's like, I got this idea. I got this marketing campaign. I got this angle I want to test. It's a hypothesis that we do in science. and then you got to do the science project, and then you get some data. Did it work or did it not? And then you adjust from that. A lot of individuals who stay stagnant, they want the actual result, the right result, because whether the project went right or wrong, we still got a result. So if we launched a marketing campaign and the marketing campaign got got us the revenue we wanted to get, or it didn't, or it totally bombed, we still got a result, and we actually still won because we got a result. So now we got some data, and now we can move based on that data. But if you never did the thing, you still stuck in stagnation mode, so you missed out on the data. So a lot of times we don't say, "Let me just do this thing for the data," right? So when you launch the show, you ain't really know people's gonna watch. I mean, you probably knew people gonna watch, but some people won't launch the show because they're like, "Ain't nobody gonna watch."
Right.
Well, you like if you launch it, you put enough out, somebody's gonna watch. But we stay stuck in stagnation. Whereas like I want to know in advance, people are gonna watch, people are gonna share, people aren't gonna say negative things. People aren't, and I was telling the client the other day, I'm like, when you launch, it's 100% chance that people are gonna say negative things. Can you live with that? Right? And then you work through that. So I think the biggest thing is like I got an idea. However, it's this chasm between idea and action. And I tell people all the time, the people who I've studied who are the most successful, they have a small gap
Hmm.
between getting a new idea or getting new information and then go implement, right? So for example, somebody watching the show, some people may think just because they watched it for however long, they're like, oh, I learned some new stuff. It's like, well, you actually don't learn no new stuff by watching the show. You only learn when you say, okay, I'm gonna take something that Mark Wallace Saquon said, and I'm actually go implement it because I got a hypothesis from them, or I got a hypothesis based on something they said. Now let me go do this science project so I can get some data for myself. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. You drop in so many jewels today. I mentioned this on a previous episode, and I want to mention it, and you already broke it down. I want you to continue to drive that thing home. There's so much data in failure,
Hmm.
right? We have to change the nature of our association
Yep.
with failure,
Yep.
right? Like we always look at it in a way that it's doom and gloom.
Hmm.
It's confirmation that I never should have did this shit to begin with,
Yep.
right? Instead of like you said, man, yo, there's an efficacy rate or there's a success rate.
Hmm.
We're plugging this hypothesis into a controlled environment, an experiment.
Yep.
Like you said, the first time we did it, it's a 10% success rate. The
Yep.
next time we do it, it's a 25% success rate.
Yep.
But there's so much data in the initial 10%. And then from that 10 to 25%, if you have the wherewithal, the fortitude, the self-love, the assuredness to just continue to pummel away at this thing, there's no telling what you'd be able to accomplish.
Yeah, because one cool shift that we can have, right? So it's a book called The Practice in Mind,
Mm,
and it basically talks about like when you're doing stuff and you're doing new stuff, just do it as if you're practicing. As if you're practicing. Let's say you want to get better at basketball, and you're working on you right-handed, but you want to get good on your left. Just like if you go out and be like, hey, you're not looking to be perfect on your left when you at practice because you just practicing. When you're out there shooting, you ain't expecting to hit all the shots
right.
because you like I'm just practicing. So if you're like, hey, I want to get better on creating video content, well, he's like, well, just go practice, right? If you want to get better at writing copy, like, go practice. If you want to get good at, conversating with women, right? Go out and practice, like start practicing and not look at it like I need to get this right. Because again, school got us messed up because school got us thinking we're going to get graded on everything. But in real life, you ain't getting graded on anything. You're grading yourself and you're beating yourself up, but you just get an A just for applying it. So even if we just took a reframe and said, okay, I can't fail. I'm gonna do this thing. I'm gonna get some data. The fact that I got some data, I won because I'm only doing this to get some data from.
Absolutely, bro. I want you to talk to us, if you would please, about focus and attention. So in the beginning, when I referenced Jordan Peterson and I talked about taking an aim and we talked about quantum of full potentiality,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then we have to sacrifice that to become one thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, basically what we're doing in a quantum reality is basically when we decide to focus and put our attention on something, we're causing the full spectrum of quantum potentiality to collapse
Yeah,
into reality. That's
100%.
basically what we're doing,
Yeah.
right? But a lot of us don't exercise attention very well
Mm-hmm.
and we don't focus very well. How often do you encounter that? And then if you do, how do you coach people through that?
all the time, right? Because especially now, because we literally have infinite possibilities and infinite information like at our fingertips. So it's like you'll have an idea and then you start scrolling social media and somebody's like, oh, well, this is an easy way to do it. Here's a better way to do it. So now you pull up all these different places. So typically when we work with business owners and they're like, well, I got this, so I got this, so I got this, so I got this, we got this thing called the rule of one. So we say, okay, all right, yeah, I know you got all these things. However, the rule of one is pick one problem you're going to solve, right? Pick one audience that you're going to service. Like, who is this ideal client that you solve that problem for? And it's like, okay, what's the one Godfather offer that you offer to them? Like, what's this one offer that you can? Yeah, you can sell a whole bunch of things. You can have a book. You can have this. You can have this. You can have this. But what's the one thing that if they bought this at whatever price point, they're going to get the result they want? What's that one thing? And then it's all right, what's the one marketing funnel that you're going to use to bring in these new leads? What's the one traffic strategy that you're going to use to get in front of people? And then what's the one conversion method, meaning the one way you convert them from a lead to an actual client, right? And then what's your one, and then you create one piece of content a day to nurture them. And then you do that for 1 year, right? At 1 year at a time, that leads to 1 million. But is that the power of one, that singular focus, right? And just hitting away that over and over and over and over. So, like for example, I was reading something that said Steph Curry shoot like 400 shots a day, right? Even during off season. So when people see him come out on the court and he can shoot it from anywhere, it's muscle memory because he's done it so many times. So he
Right.
got how do you become amazing at shooting? You get singularly focused on becoming the best shooter in the world. Over and he's like, I'm obsessed with this singular activity. I don't need to come down and cross everybody up. But you can tell, like Allen Iverson, when Allen Iverson used to come down with them handles, you can tell Allen Iverson was focused on getting foolish with the handles because you can see it show up. You know what I'm saying? Steph is seriously committed to one singular thing. Not saying he can't bring the ball up. Not saying he can't do the other things. 100% he can do all those things. But he can shoot from anywhere. So you focus on doing that over and over and over and over and over
Absolutely. Yeah. So having that tunnel vision, that single minded focus,
again.
listening to you and learning from you
Hmm.
is incredibly essential, right?
100%.
So now I want to talk about distractions because a lot of us, myself included, we're plagued with distraction. A lot of it's knowingly, but I would dare say a lot of it is also unknowingly
Yeah,
because we don't really quantify our time
yeah,
and more importantly, what we do in our time,
mm,
right? Like, okay, so 24 hours in a day times seven,
yeah,
right? It's 168 hours, right? I got
mhm,
40 hours for work. And then if I'm sleeping 8 hours a night, let's just say we're doing that, that's another 40 hours, right?
mhm,
So we deduct that 80, that leaves us with 88 hours, right?
mhm,
Average, and we're in football season. Shout out to all my football fans out there.
mhm,
We're not hating. Average length of a football game is 3 hours and 12 minutes, right? Now on Sunday, we might watch 3 games,
mhm.
right? And that's conservative, right?
Yeah,
So that's 6 hours and 24 minutes.
wow.
But then you got Monday night football, then you got Thursday night football, right?
Yeah,
So that's another 6 hours and 24 minutes. So now we're down from that 88 that we had left to 72 hours, well, 72.4 hours, right?
mhm,
And then we got to factor in Saturday for college football, right? And the average, so we deduct that, and now we factor in social media. The average person spends 2 hours and a half on social media daily,
wow.
right? So if we quantify that and then we put that to the week, that's 17 and a half hours. So now we're down from that 72.4 that doesn't include the time from watching college football to 54.9.
Right.
And we haven't even talked about essentials, right? We haven't talked about family time. We haven't
Yep,
talked about time with the wife,
yep,
helping our kids out.
yep,
You understand what I'm saying? With
mhm,
their homework, taking showers, eating. We haven't factored in any of that.
yep,
And then we haven't even talked about the productivity, right? Because a lot of that time when we're watching these games, we're consuming alcohol, right? And we're
mhm,
consuming a lot of it. So we're waking up groggy,
yep,
right? Which affects our productivity.
yep,
So that skews that number even more.
yep.
So how much of an impediment is distraction?
So I was asking the client the other day, right? I was like, if I was like, let's say me and you are direct competitors,
Hmm.
right? And I don't I don't believe in competition, so to speak. But I was using this as an example. It's like we were direct competitors. I was like, what's my number one way to defeat you? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I will present you with opportunities. I'll just continue to present you with opportunities. Here's an opportunity. Here's an opportunity. And sometimes we'll look at these opportunities as, okay, this is an opportunity. Let me jump on this. But those are really just distractions, right? So a lot. So we don't. So I think the opposite of that is like, okay, because like you said, we ain't hating. Watch your football. Do the things, do the things. But it's like I look at time as like it's like a budget, right? So it's like how are you, like even how you would budget your money. Okay, how would you budget this? You got your mortgage, you got this, you got this. But so at the same time, if you're like, hey, I got 24 hours in the day, and then you take off the other things, like you said, how do I allocate these specific times, right? So we have this thing called the 4-hour workday method. So it's like, how do you go and scale a business in 4 hours a day? And somebody's like, how you gonna do that in 4 hours a day? Because everybody's so accustomed to 40-hour work weeks, 40-hour work weeks. So it's like 8, 9 hours a day. But a lot of times it's just inefficiency, right? You focus on all these inefficiencies. Even when like go back to the school system, one of the things we saw with COVID is that when COVID happened and we were all on when we had to do online school at first, well, a lot of the time, like school would technically be at first school would be done by noon,
Hmm.
like because all the kids' work was done and everything. And I told my wife, I was like, this has shown us how inefficient school is, right? Because these kids are done with their work by 11. So it's like, what are they doing until 2:30, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock? You know what I'm saying? It's just inefficient. And that's just how we always learned to do it. So that's an example of like in our days, we'll be like, man, where did all the time go? Well, you just broke down where all the time went. You know what I'm saying? Or you like, man, my kids grew up so fast. Where was the time go? Well, we were watching the game. We were at work, and we just it goes back to our wit and devil that we talked about. We just drifted, and we didn't realize it because media had us in fear, stagnation. Right? These things were going on. We were trying to keep up with the Joneses and see what everybody else had going on, and we just get sucked into like this vortex, right? And people monetize like attention is the most valuable thing in the world right now, and these big companies are like monetizing our attention. So we got to be very, very. It's almost revolutionary to actually unplug from the matrix to like delete the social media. Right? Sometimes I think like delete social media. Like what? It's like yeah, you got to literally create a force field around you to take back your attention and like okay, what are the things that I'm focused on like the most and be super relentless in those things, whatever it is for you based on, your goals.
I love that. And that's actually a perfect segue. But because you said something so dope that I found on your Instagram, and I want you to break it down and unpack it. But before we do, you said so many things that were super profound. But yeah, so the work was finished between 11 and 12,
Hmm.
right? And then you referenced in the beginning how you were bored with
Yep.
school during your formative years,
Yep.
right? Now, I can deduce just from talking to you, right? Like the subject matter and the
Hmm.
manner in which it was being taught to you was not stimulating at all because you have a beautiful mind, right?
Hmm.
But then, no, that's just keeping it real. But then, yeah, we experienced the same thing too, right?
Hmm.
Like, yeah, like our workload was being done very, very, very fast. But yeah, I experienced that boredom as well with all of that time. And
Hmm.
then, especially for men and women, right? But for men, like Jordan Peterson talks about that. He says, listen, boys need way more strenuous physical activity,
Hmm.
way more, right?
Hmm.
Because you have this testosterone, this is pre adolescence,
Hmm.
your hormones, your body is forming in a different type of way. So, and you're bouncing off the wall, but because the curriculum is inefficient,
Hmm.
right? And then dare say teachers, not all teachers, but some, and it's not their fault, right?
That's not their fault.
But what they're learning and how to be efficient teachers, they're not necessarily being taught how to deal with a hyper rambunctious child that's seemingly running off the wall,
Yep.
right? Bouncing off the wall, I should say. But then also the oversized classrooms,
Yep.
right? So you're dealing with maybe 30, 35 students in a classroom, and then you have maybe five
Hmm.
that you would categorize as unruly,
Yep.
right? And then we're putting them on medication.
Yeah, I was just about
So,
to say that.
right, right.
Hmm.
Well, go ahead.
Now I was gonna ask. I was gonna say one. I'm glad you said you nailed it. It's like because now we'll say this child is ADHD,
That's what I'm
right?
saying.
And I work with business owners who call themselves ADHD, they call themselves ADHD because somebody else told them that they were ADHD at some point. Like a lot of my homies who I grew up with, well, not a lot of them, but some of them, they were put on Ritalin, like a medication, and now it's Adderall, right? But it's like because they couldn't sit and focus on somebody talking in front of a thing from somebody who couldn't necessarily connect, right? Because just because you're sharing information in front of a room don't mean you teach it. So I think it goes back to what it goes back to exactly what you're breaking down, like the inefficiencies, and now it kind of puts us into this um, that vortex, right? And now we're just like, okay, now we gotta do, and now it's about just doing this within the time and the amount of time we give, the amount of time we give something to get done is going to expand in that time. So if we say, okay, it's 8 hours to do this, it got to expand to 8 hours to do this. But if we're like, we're gonna get this thing done in an hour, then you get it done in an hour.
Absolutely. And with that breakdown a moment ago with that little bit of math, maybe that's where we learn how to be distracted,
Yeah.
right? Like if we're tying the mental health to this and everything is a learned behavior, right?
Mhm.
So our school experience, our epigenetic influence being understimulated
Yeah.
and figuring out what to do with all of this time. And then now we're adults. Now, I would also argue that a lot of us aren't as efficient as we need to be
Mhm.
as adults either, right?
Yeah.
We're spreading out that time to accomplish simple tasks, like you said, that could be done in a shorter amount of time,
Yeah.
but through this learned behavior,
Mhm.
it's like I kind of learned how to be inefficient,
Yeah.
and then I learned how to feed myself distraction,
Yeah.
right? Which is a very scary situation. Or, like you said earlier, that's a very scary scientific experiment when you
Mhm.
look at what it ultimately produces. And
100%.
then with the social media, the segue I wanted to do, because you mentioned, you said something on your Instagram that was so dope, man. Overwhelmed by information. So it's information versus implementation.
Yeah.
It kind of ties into that critical period between idea and execution. So talk to us a little bit about how we're inundated with a whole bunch of information and how that ultimately thwarts our implementation.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, you before we started shooting, you talked about it. You was like, consuming information is like you said, a hit. It's like that dopamine hit, new information, new information, new information, new information, and it feels good
Right.
to get new information, right? So, for example, anybody who's watching this, it feels good to sit here for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever to consume information, taking tons of notes, feeling real good. All right, go out. Oh man, I feel good watching that. And then if we say, all right, look, this is what we want y'all to do. Someone wants you to do this, and we give them like real action steps to go do.
Yeah.
Then a whole nother side of the brain, the amygdala now kicks in, right? So now it's
Absolutely.
like, if you do that, what if other people laugh at you? You remember that time in school when you was in kindergarten and people laughed at you, or if you do that, what if you go broke and now you can't pay your mortgage? Like all the worst thing, and now we'll be like, all right, you know what? You're right. Let me don't do anything and let me stay safe, right? Because it feels good to consume new information. Doesn't feel as good to actually go do because just consuming information, you have full certainty. You know that if you just sit there, you're going to consume information. But if you go do something, this is where uncertainty kicks in because you don't know. Yeah, Marquell said this is what happened when he did this. Yes, Saquon said this will happen when he did this. But when I do this, I don't speak well, or I wasn't good in school, or I'm not this, I'm not this. All the things come up, and that's where the uncertainty comes in. People don't want to live in uncertainty. That's why a lot of times, even with business, when people are transitioning from to like corporate and a job to business, their biggest thing is they want to come into entrepreneurship and have certainty. And it's like it doesn't get more uncertain than entrepreneurship.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So I think that's that transition of it feels good to consume information. That's why the personal development world is so huge. The personal development, self-development world is worth multiple billions, maybe trillions, maybe, because it's about just buying another book, going to another seminar, going to another retreat, getting the information, feeling good, and then just going to the other one. But if you look at the amount of people whose lives are actually transformed, people go back to their regular lives because when they go back into their regular lives, this is what uncertainty. What is my family going to say if I change? What is my job going to say if I change? What if I actually do this? What if this does work? What if this doesn't work? All those different things, all this uncertainty. They're like, well, you know what? My situation ain't so bad. Like my regular life, they're like, my regular life ain't so bad. Well, at least I've learned to live with it. Let me just do what I'm doing, and then just continue to go to the conferences.
Absolutely. Perfect segue, man. You are killing this frame, and he hasn't seen it, so it's amazing.
Appreciate it.
So I want to talk about that proving ground of isolation. Like you said, we fear the unknown,
Yeah.
right? uh, Obviously in entrepreneurship, but also in the mental health space,
Mhm.
which you've shown on several occasions today that the two are intertwined,
100%.
right? Um, but yeah, we fear that unknown in that isolation period. You know, our inner critic kicks in, like you just said, man, you can't do this. What about that time in school when people laughed at you?
Mhm.
So on and so forth. That's why that period of isolation is a proving ground,
Yeah.
right? So, how do you encourage people and teach people to continue building in silence when you're not getting that pat on the back, you're
Yeah.
not getting that applause?
So that's when the truth. You just said something powerful. You said in the isolation is the training ground. Like that's where the real magic happens. We only see LeBron James for I think you said the NBA game is
Couple of
a
hours,
couple
yeah.
of hours, right? But it's like we see LeBron on the court then for those couple of hours or however long, 20 minutes he played, whatever. But you don't see him waking up. You don't see him the 10 hours of sleep. You don't see the $2 million a year on his body. You don't see these things. This is what you doing those. So he really gets paid for everything that he does off the court. And then when he comes to the court, he's just showing what I've done in private, right? So even in the Bible, right? That's my favorite book. And it talks about how
Shout to the Bible.
shout out to the Bible 100%. It talks about how before Jesus had went into his public ministry, the first thing he did was he did 40 days of fasting, and then the Bible said he went into the wilderness to be tempted by the enemy, right? So it's like he had to go in isolation. He had to go be tempted to really see if he was ready to step out to do the things, right? And then it also ties back to anytime he taught or anything in a synagogue or in the streets or whatever, it always talks about how he always went into solitude to be by himself. Like his disciples would be like, "Hey, bro, like you need to come holler at these guys." They, he had a big crowd. They were like, "Hey, they want to meet you. They want to shake your hand. They want to take pictures." Like modern day, you go to an event, everybody want to take pictures and all this different type of stuff. He used to be like, "All right, I need to go pray. I need to go get to myself. Yeah, I get all that. I've served. Let me go get to myself." So it's like, what are you doing in those times? Like for example, we're doing this show, and like some of the best shows I've been on is individuals who actually sat down and then like done some study to get solid questions. For example, like you just mentioned, like you got a whole frame. Like we sat down and had a conversation before for us to connect, and you created like a whole thing. Like you did that in silence. Like most people are like, well, I want to have a platform like this. Are you willing to actually do your homework? Are you willing to go create a frame and do things to actually come sit down with actual solid questions? Are you like, well, I don't need all that. I just ask the questions automatically. So now you show up not even prepared.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like that's the real stuff. So it's like sometimes people tell me, man, you're such a natural on stage. Like how you do it? It's like, well, I just been on a lot of stages. So I've created thousands of videos. And if you look at the library, it's like, what are you doing in the quiet time? Like, are you reading or are you just are you reading? Are you consuming for production or are you just consuming, just to be consuming? So it's like, when you in the gym, if you like really not working, probably other people ain't in the gym with you because you're in there so early, you got to go do other things. So it's all the other stuff that happens in private. It's almost like if you think about a seed, when you put a seed in the ground,
Hmm.
it actually is in the dark. It breaks in the dark, and there's years of like things that happen before actual tree, actually comes to the ground and actually even the apple tree. I was reading the other day, an apple tree, it actually takes 5 to 7 years before it actually produces apples. But it got to go through all the whole process. And I think what I've seen is that a lot of people just aren't wanting to go through the process because social media has made it seem like everybody's just winning and everybody's just winning without, like you said, that private time. People be like, "Oh man, you just blew up overnight. Oh man, you just came out of nowhere." And it's like, no, I ain't come out of nowhere. I was putting videos out when I had 1 view, then I had 2 views, and I went for a series of time where I was getting 3 or 4 views, but I was still showing up, serving those people, still showing up, serving those people. When I was getting no views, I was still showing up, putting it, and then 5, 10, 15 years later, now you done actually, built something. like Mr. Beast, like crazy audience. It was like, go back and watch some of his old videos when he only had 2 subscribers. You know what I'm saying? People they don't want to see that. They like, no, I just want, the big platform and social media, and a lot of gurus sell us something because a lot of times we'd rather believe a lie. We'd rather believe it's an easier way than going through the process.
Absolutely.
And it ain't. The only way you get there is, like you said, in the private time, doing the development, up early in the morning, going through your time of solitude, getting rooted, getting grounded. So now you can actually come from a full place when it comes to like the practical business stuff or just the practical life stuff, even if it's not business.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. We encounter, and I've been guilty of this in the
Mm-hmm.
past, having the victim mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. We don't pay attention to the process.
Yep.
We look at the end result,
Mm-hmm.
or we are the perceived end result,
Yep.
because what you show me on social media may not be what your reality actually is.
100.
But let's just take best case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what you're showing me is what your reality is, and
Mm-hmm.
kudos to you.
Yeah.
But with the victimized mindset, I'll take your best case, right? And I'll tie it to my worst case.
Yep.
And then I'll allow my inner critic to start. See, this person has something that you don't,
Yep.
which is the reason why you can't be successful,
Yep.
right? But I also think that we've been taught and conditioned to do that, obviously via trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But also, we all have a propensity to deify people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's a when you really break that down, that's a relinquishing of the necessary responsibility and accountability that one needs to take the reins or the helms of their own life,
Yep.
my own life,
Yep.
right? And put that same work in.
Yep.
You understand what I'm saying?
100%.
So I agree with you I agree with you wholeheartedly. I also think that there's another component to the proving ground for isolation. And I'd like for you to I'll touch upon this. You already talked about working in silence,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the other component of that is, are you a proponent of not sharing things until it's done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, is that a form of protection? Protection from ourselves. Like I remember when you mentioned earlier, you alluded to, I mentioned the inner critic, but you alluded to it prior to me mentioning it when you were talking about, I want to do this thing, but what about the time when you were in school and they
Mm-hmm.
laughed at you, this, that, and the other? See, that's internal, right?
Yep.
But we also get that externally,
Yep.
right, from people, right? So we share ideas, and that may also lead to the stagnation or the extension of that critical space between idea and
Mm-hmm.
execution, because we're listening to people that A, may not have your best interests at heart, B, projecting their own fears of failure onto you,
Mm-hmm.
and they're saying, man, you shouldn't do that. This could happen. I heard this profound saying change my life. Fear is disguised oftentimes as intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell you why you shouldn't do this, right? Now I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna tell you some intelligent shit
Yep.
as to why you shouldn't do
Why you
it,
should do
right?
it.
And you stifling my dream. So how
Yep.
much of that are, if you are a proponent of don't share until it's done, how much
I,
of a proponent are you?
I think I'm not necessarily a proponent of it. I do think that we got to be careful who we share. Not necessarily even more so who we share stuff with. I think we got to be careful of who we listen to. Right? We got to be very because I like the idea of like having wise counsel around you where
Mm,
you can go share. Hey, here's what I'm thinking. What am I missing? What do you see that I don't see? Type of thing. But I also think, especially as a visionary, you gotta share what hasn't been done yet. So if you
I
got
like that.
your crew, or I think one of the things I'm gifted at is like being a visionary. It's like even when I was in the streets, it's like one of my vision when I was in the streets was just be the biggest dope boy ever. I just wanted to be a big drug king. That was my vision. And this was before I even heard about BMF and all that. And when I heard about BMF, I was like, that's what I want. You know what I'm saying?
No doubt.
That's the picture of what I want. But before then, I was studying. Just like we talk about Peterson and we talk about Huberman, we talk about these other people. I was studying Pablo Escobar, Rayful Edmonds, like all the dudes who had did it at a high level. So my vision was that. So I had to communicate that vision to the team. Like, hey, we're gonna be getting these bags in. We're gonna get them at a good number. If we need to go to Mexico, whatever the whole thing is, this is what we build it, and we're gonna take all that parlay it. So even when I got into the music world, I'm like, we're gonna be, big, record label executives. Big. That's how we're gonna make our millions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like that's part of being a visionary. and and that's just part of it. Now, if you just keep it to yourself, it's like you can't move people. So sometimes I'll tell business owners, and they're like, "Well, I can't really afford to pay for this particular role. But what if it's an issue with me being able to pay these individuals?" I'm like, "Well, some individuals will come for the vision. If they're there just for the salary, they're not ideal anyway. There, some people will come for the vision. They're like, okay, I see the vision, and I see how I can accomplish my vision within this. Your vision is big enough for me to accomplish my vision within the vision. So, for example, Bill Gates had a vision where he was like, all right, we're going to put a laptop on every home in the world, right? So now if I go work at Microsoft, I'm like, I can be a part of
Facts.
getting a laptop on every single home. I literally be able to go out and be like, hey, I was a part of doing that because I see this vision is big enough. But what if he didn't share that? You know, he shared it before it was done. Like visions are always shared before they're done. I think the downfall is needing affirmation,
Mm,
right? So if you're locked
that's
in,
heavy.
yeah. So if you're locked in, like, hey, I'm doing it. I'm just sharing this with you because this is what I'm about to do. No, and even when we talk about quantum, you talked about quantum a little while ago. I'm sharing this with you because not only is this is what I'm about to do, this is already done in the quantum realm, right? The spiritual realm. Yes, linearly, I got to do some things, to get in line with this happening. But I'm just sharing this, right? So you will know. And if you want to get on board, you can. I'm not sharing this with you for you to affirm my idea. I'm already doing this with or without you. If you want to join me on the ride, let's do it. If not, that's cool too. I just don't want no negativity around.
Very well said. That's the distinguishing factor.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for affirmation.
Affirmation.
I've been guilty of that
Yeah.
in the past. We all have.
Yeah.
But when you're expressing it like you just said, yo, this is what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
either you get on board or not,
Yep.
that's a different level of conviction.
100%. Like my wife, for example, speak with entrepreneurs sometimes, and they want to work with us, and sometimes they have some dissonance with them and their spouse, and their spouse is an entrepreneur. Like my wife is an entrepreneur, right? She's talking about doing some entrepreneur stuff with her nursing degree and so forth. She's not an entrepreneur, so a lot of stuff that I did early on in my career, it didn't make sense to her, right? But she also wasn't like, why are you doing this? That don't make sense, blah, blah, blah. Even sometimes if I'm going to a conference or I'm doing whatever, she'll be like, well, don't you know that stuff already? And I'm like, well, yeah, I do know parts of it, but it's something that I can pull from it to apply and continue, the compound. But I wasn't looking for her to say, if she didn't affirm or the idea didn't make sense to her, it wouldn't stop me from doing it. Does that make sense? So even when I got out the streets and my homies, it's like when I got out the streets, some people think that when I got out the streets, all my homies left the streets with me. Like, no, I left the streets. They were still in the streets because we had certainty there. That's why show money was. That's why identity was. Whole nine. So here I am stepping out the boat, like walking on water, like Peter, right? And it looked crazy because everybody knew me from that particular world.
Right.
But I didn't step out into doing what I was doing for affirmation. I didn't need them to be like, go for it, bro. You got it. I believe in you, that type of thing. I was just like, I'm locked in. I see some possibility with this. If y'all want to rock with me, cool. If not, we still bros. Like, we still tapped in too. But if you do want to go this route, let's have a conversation. If not, I ain't judging you for what you got going on. And then we still brothers, but we just on different wavelengths at this particular point.
You are a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
And that level of vision, that level of assuredness, that level of confidence, let's just summarize all of that. That level of worthiness. What attacks or eats away at the mindset of worthiness?
I think one of the biggest things is not, and I think for me, I was going to say on something earlier that you mentioned. For me, I didn't realize this until like the last 2 years. Pretty much all of my success over the years has been from, because you mentioned early on, you was like, you've had this locked in at this assurity and so forth. But what I realized, even over the last couple of years, by even doing some deep work, was like all of my success was like rooted and driven by survival. You know what I'm saying? I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to be able to thrive, but I wanted to survive. So I began to create this unhealthy relationship with money. Well, money was a means of survival. So if money was up, I'm good. It's a trigger to my brain. Like I'm safe. money, sometimes you look at the account and it's a little lower than it was the other day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then your brain start going, oh man, everything is, you still got more money than you've ever had. But your brain will be like, well, this is low. And then you'll feel like you're regressing, and regressing can feel like death. So it was just survival, 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 survival. And then I had to realize that my identity was rooted in how much money I made, what I did for people, the business I built, the things I did, the stages I've been on. So that tied to my worthiness, right? And that's why I said my favorite book is the Bible, because it reminds me that I'm a child of God. I'm already worthy. Before before I did anything, again, it takes me back to Jesus when, like it says, when Jesus was baptized, said the sky was parted, and then God was like, "This is my son, whom I'm well pleased." He hadn't done anything. He hadn't healed nobody. He hadn't preached. He hadn't done anything. God already said, "I'm already pleased with him." So especially as men, and I talk to my brothers especially a lot, even with women, and it's not even a black or a white thing, but a lot of times we're out here, go back to affirmation. We weren't affirmed growing up. We weren't told we were worthy. We were pretty much, the perception was we are what we do, right? Well, when brothers meet, hey brother, what you doing? Nice to meet you. Right after our name. So what do you do?
Exactly.
And then based on what the brother says he does, you automatically size him up. Or, we see even like some of the our grandparents or great, and like, well, what their parents do? You know what I'm saying? So now we're sizing them up based on what they do, how much money they make, what car they drive, all these different things. And we're doing a lot of these from social media as fuel to this thing. Put a video out, didn't get really no engagements. Now, dang, am I not worthy? Am I not valuable? Is what I'm saying not valuable? Is what I gotta say even valuable? So that goes back to the identity piece, right? So I think we got to get away from external validation and affirmation, right? That makes us, where our worthiness come from. And even so I had my dad growing up. So one thing I didn't want to get wrong was this father thing.
Yes, sir.
So I found myself at times seeking affirmation from my kids, right? So it's like I feel like I need to do these, or even with my wife, because I didn't want to mess it up, right? I didn't grow up around married couples and all that. So I was doing things for affirmation, and if they didn't respond the way I expected them to respond, I'd feel away. Because I'm like, well, damn, I did this thing for. I was talking to somebody one day, and it was like they said they don't do gifts, they don't do birthday gifts, they don't do Christmas gifts or anything, because they found that they were doing the Christmas gifts and the birthday gifts for themselves. So it was like I was buying these gifts to give this person a gift so I can see their reaction, and their reaction was their payoff. And if they didn't react the way they wanted to react, then they feel away. So that's all rooted in, worthiness. I'm doing all these things. I need to make more money to feel more worthy. I need to get another car to feel more worthy. I need to go on a different stage or a different podcast. All these different things to feel more worthy. And if those things don't happen, now we're operating from a place of unworthiness.
I'm incredibly delighted that we got together today and we're doing this right now, man, because you're a sharp brother and a lot of people can learn. I'm learning so much from you, and I'm incredibly appreciative of it. In that, you just broke down, for an intelligent person to be able to deduce it, you just broke down the importance of detachment,
Yeah.
right? And not but the thing is, we confuse detachment with apathy, right? We detach our emotions,
Mhm.
and we equate it with the desire for approval, which you just broke down so eloquently. We can oftentimes get caught up in that, right?
Mhm.
But the safeguard from that, again, is the ability to detach.
Yeah.
I found myself getting caught up in that recently. Like, shout out to my brother Lee. Like, I would talk to Lee a lot, man. Even with the production of the podcast, I'm like, yo, I feel like this is dope information. And you alluded to this a little while ago, when you started. You got to keep working in silence. I got the one like, I got two likes, this, that,
Mhm.
and the other. But I found myself getting caught up in that, right? Like,
Mhm.
yo, man, people ain't getting this information. And then I would lie to myself thinking that, yo, it's okay to feel that way because it's righteous.
Mhm.
Nah, it was self-righteous.
Yeah.
Like, why are you really doing this,
Yeah.
right? Because if you're really doing it to help people,
Yeah.
then you should be proud of the fact that it came from nothingness and now it exists.
No, you.
And then once it exists, exercise the art of detachment.
Yeah.
If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. I've fulfilled my fiduciary responsibility.
That's it.
and they say that, you know, the universe, the Most High, God, whomever you choose to prescribe or subscribe to in that regard, once you detach, that's truly when all the work begins to happen.
Yep.
Me attaching to it, and Joe Dispenza talks about this. I'm trying to control the outcome. So there I am. I'm trying to make the unknown
Yeah.
known,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't work that way.
No.
So you just broke down the beauty and importance of detachment, and I appreciate you for that,
For
man.
sure.
And you also, perfect segue, you alluded to something else. Shifting the mindset from a
Mhm.
mindset of lack to a mindset of abundance.
Mhm.
On your Instagram, you was like, yo, your childhood is keeping you broke.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because so I was watching. I was talking to. Well, I was watching my boy Dave. Shout out to my guy Dave Shans. I was watching one of his videos the other day, and he was basically like, "Life isn't about the accumulation of money." He was like, "It's about the accumulation of experiences, right?"
Yes.
And he was like, once you get to a point where now you got more money in your account than you ever had at one time, maybe it's 4 figures, maybe it's 5 figures, 6 figures, whatever the number is, because we didn't have it growing up and we were chasing this thing for so long, now we finally have it. It literally, and I've been teaching on this, it literally becomes like an altar of sorts
It's
where you
exactly what it becomes.
where you
A
worship
golden
it.
calf.
It becomes a golden calf. So you're like, man, got this amount of my account. I need to keep this, right? This is my safety now. And you begin to trust. And I found myself here. Like I began to trust that more than God. I believed in God, but I didn't realize till later on that I trusted this more than trusting God though. Because God is my source. God actually provided this. I kind of got away from that. So it became like a thing, right? So what all that came from my childhood of seeing that money was the ultimate thing. Money was the thing. People who had money, that's who people looked up to. That's who people honored, right? So we used to grow up and we used to have like they'd be like, who is that? Well, that's Uncle such and such. You know, he worked for GE,
Yeah.
making $20 an hour. Like
Yeah.
that was how they defined you.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? He do this, he make this amount of hour. People like, what? He made good money. And you were honored for that. So you were like, dang, I want to be that person. So when you get to this point of like what you see as security, right? And what happens is when you put that money on the pedestal, it actually perpetuates lack because you're like, well, this is just a small snapshot of what's actually available because you think this 100,000 or this 200,000 or this million or whatever is this thing, you automatically go into lack because now you go into like protection. I need to protect this. I need to keep this. Now you're like, well, I'm not going to make any decisions that's going to put this at risk. So now you're going to shrinking. I just need to hold on to this. When in reality, it's just a number. It's not literally in your bank account anyway. It's just a fallacy. And it's just like this human construct. Because if you think about it, if you go back, what we use as money right now wasn't even a thing. It was like if I had cow and you had corn, or if I had whatever, I come to you and be like, all right, hey, we need some corn. Let me give you these frankincense in exchange for your corn.
Absolutely.
And we do business like that. Money wasn't even a concept.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But then later on, money became a concept and then it became a god in many ways, like we were just kind of alluding to.
Absolutely, man. Now you said earlier, and I agree with you 100%. And you taught me when I was talking about working in silence and not working for the applause. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, well, I'm a visionary. I'm going to share that vision, right? But I'm not looking for the affirmation.
Yeah.
But you reference your crew, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to talk about the importance of shaping the environment or our spheres of influence, who
Mm-hmm.
I allow to be in that circle,
Yeah.
and who I allow to be influenced by, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because you said it on your Instagram, yo, hanging with drifters, that can get you life in prison.
100%.
And you referenced the outstanding book by Napoleon Hill,
Yeah.
Outwitting the Devil.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love for you to talk about that.
For sure. 100%. I mean, we saw it's been a big thing recently. I don't know how much you followed it or seen it, But even with the YSL, YFN,
Hmm.
the whole Rico that them brothers had going on,
Yeah.
it's like that goes back to like who you got around you, who's pouring into you from a mentorship standpoint, and then who's around you from a protege standpoint, and who's around you like as your colleagues, right? Your comrades. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, hey man, y'all brothers up. So for example, think about it. Think about coming from the gutter, right? The projects, this is in the third. We like always dreamed of becoming millionaires to get out the hood.
Hmm.
Then you make millions by going into the studio, making music, generating millions. You're world renowned to buy Lambos and Rolls Royces just to drive back through the hood. Like that makes no sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, where was the mentorship that was like, hey, bro, like you tripping?
Yeah.
Like this ain't what the purpose was to get out the game. The purpose wasn't to go get your upfront check from this record label and go buy bricks to put in the hood, or to go buy pounds of weed to put in the hood. Like this ain't so. So it goes back. So now, but if you're around a whole bunch of yes men and drifters, and they like, yeah, let's do that, let's do that. Now you find yourself in a situation where you realize that all this was transactional anyway. They only rock with me because of what I could do for them. But when they got an opportunity to free themselves up, right, whether taking the plea or telling on me or whatever, they did it. I always tell my older sons, and even any of my nephews or whatever, I'm like, they're like, oh, these my twin, they ain't gonna do that. I'm like, bro, everybody tells. Like when they go down and they start talking about 30, 40, 50, 100 years, it's like everybody tell. The biggest, they tell. So it's like, who are you around? Even so one thing that really speaks to your network is like doing estate planning. Because when you do estate planning, it makes you really face your mortality,
Hmm.
right? And that's why I think a lot of people avoid it, because you got to talk about, you got to plan like, what do you want for your funeral? If something was to happen to you, and you was a vegetative state, do you want them to just pull the thing, or do you want to try to fight it? So you got to answer all that stuff. You like, what? Right? And it's like, well, something happened to you. What about your kids? And then that one is like, who do you want to take your kids? And you start looking at your circle like, who in my circle would I trust with my kids? And that's really what you see what you're working with. And I was watching an interview on the way here, and the brother was like, no matter how big your platform becomes, no matter how much money you get or whatever, you really only gonna have five or less people who really rock with you if you didn't have the platform, if you didn't have the money, right? If you need to be like, hey bro, I need to come sleep on the floor to like get myself together. Like, who can you call? It's gonna be like, oh bro, pull up, got you. Who can you really call? You know what I'm saying? They're like, well, no, you got it, blah, blah, blah. But you really only gonna have five or less people that really rock with you like that. So I think we gotta be very careful of how we steward those relationships, because as you're growing, a lot of stuff is like very transactional. And then you don't really start realizing who in your circle till you start saying no. And then when you start saying no, even your relatives, you start seeing how they respond to a no. So I think that we got to be very careful. But my pastor calls it you got your circle, and he calls it your inner court, like your sacred circle, like the people who are closest to you. Like even Jesus had 12 disciples, but he had the three that he rocked with, who was like, he goes to the mountain and talk to God, y'all three, y'all roll with me, right? Because those were his inner court. So we got to be very aware of like, what that looked like. And again, my pastor always says, like, you're blessed through your relationships, right? Think about it, we having this conversation because of a mutual relationship. A brother Lee, we both respect. He was like, hey, man, my God. He was watching a video of mine. Crazy thing, we was at the gym, and he was like, bro, I didn't know you do all this. Because I don't be at the gym talking about what I got going. I'm there with I'm just kicking it, right?
No
I'm,
doubt.
I'm a dad, just like everybody else. He's like, I didn't know you did all this. And he was like, I sent the video to my guy Saquon. He want to get you on the show. He was like, what do we need to do? I'm like, well, just tell him to text me. Because normally, you got to go to the team and all that. I'm like, just tell him to shoot me a text. And when you text me, I was like, let's get it set up. Too easy. Get with the squad. But a relationship. And then who knows, what this will begin to blossom into. I think it's all about like, okay, Lee solid. I know how he is about his son. I respect the brother who respect their kids and locked in with their kids. So his man got to be solid, right? So, let's see what happens. So we gotta assess our relationships. Crazy situation. I was talking to my barber this morning.
Mhm.
Barber 2 chairs down. I don't know if you saw it, but recently this brother like was on the news for killing his wife.
No, I didn't see that.
This is like last week, I think,
Oh,
like 11 days ago.
man.
The dude it cuts 2 seats down
Wow.
from my this ties what you asked full circle to your question. So my man, like I cut right, like my guy cut right here. It's a seat right there, and then your seat. The barber there is the dude who killed his wife.
God damn.
Now he's had 2 other similar situations with other wives. Like previously, he done been to prison for something similar before.
Oh,
And this is my man's guy. He had no idea. He had no like. It was in the newspaper. I don't even read the newspaper. My son, my 12-year-old, saw it, and he was like, "Don't." And I look, and I'm like, yes. So I text my guy, and I'm like, "Hey, this your man?" He was like, "Yeah, man, we gotta talk." So imagine looking at your circle. This is what this brother is capable of. This is what this
absolutely.
brother has done. This is your man's. You've introduced me to. This is your man's,
Right.
right? So we got to be again. This ties back to our circle and adding in our circle, and being very careful of who we locking in with.
No, you're absolutely right, bro. Like, because I was talking to Lee not too long ago, and I shared with him. I said, bro, we're always one choice, one decision away from complete success, and we're
Yep.
always one decision away from complete destruction,
100%.
right? And so that story just brought that home. And then another thing that you said, and I want to mention, because you've put a lot of work in, bro. Like you've
Mhm.
been in these trenches, and everything that you have, you deserve. So I just want to take a moment to express my sincere appreciation
For sure.
because, like, it speaks to your character.
Mhm.
Because you're absolutely right. Yo, Lee said, "Yo, I got my man. Y'all should link."
Yep.
And when you said, "Yo, just tell him to shoot me a text," like where you are and everything
Mhm.
that you've accomplished, there can be, and I'm sure there is, conceivably layers
Yeah.
of communication
Mhm.
to get to you,
Yep.
right? But just that level of being solid,
Yep.
you know what I'm saying,
Yep.
is a beautiful thing. And I think our community needs a lot more of that. So I commend and appreciate
For sure.
for being willing to do this, man.
100%. And like you said, like because when you first reached out, I was like, let's do it, just so I don't double book myself. Shoot my
Hmm.
team an email, tell them to get it scheduled, etc. And then when I didn't hear from you, I didn't see it on the calendar or nothing, and I shot you a text because I had gave my man. I was like, we gonna do it. So I had gave him my word, and I had gave you my word
Absolutely.
that we was gonna do it. So I reached back and you was like, "Hey, well, I got with the team," and they said, you only do it on these days, these times." And I was like, "Well, how does your situation work?" And you told me, and I was like, "All right, let's make it work." And then we made it work. I think our word is everything. It's more valuable than money, more valuable than platforms. Like if you say you're gonna do something, like my boys know, it's like be a man of your word, like regardless of what it is.
Absolutely. And I genuinely appreciate that, my
Otherwise,
brother. I want to take a moment and I want to talk about, and I want to tie, the spirituality component to it too, right?
mhm,
Because you're a great and worthy man.
sure.
I want to talk about your unorthodox way in which you learned what success is, right? We alluded to it earlier in the conversation. See, the Most High say, "I'll take the meek, I'll take the lowest among us, and I'll sit in with kings," right?
Mhm,
Listening to you today, anybody, myself, the viewership, like you can be, I got a degree from Harvard, I got this, I got that,
mhm,
right? And no one would question that. Like
mhm.
the way in which you purport yourself, the way that you speak, right? But that's just the beauty of the Most High. That's the beauty of who we are as a people.
Yep.
Like you said, the skies cracked. You saw the white dove. The Most High spoke. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased with. So you knew your worthiness, right?
Mhm.
But a lot of us brothers, we learn in this unorthodox way,
Yeah.
right? And just like you said on Instagram, like, yo, if you can hustle, you could build $1 million business. And you
100%.
already gave the game
Mhm.
on how to do that. But I'd like for you to unpack that just a little bit more,
Yeah, for sure. So cause so we mentioned earlier like my heart for like the youth, right?
man. Hmm.
And so I would it's like, hey, look, if you can, because like one time I was talking to some youngins and it was like they was talking about how they go out striking, and striking is like they're going out, they go out and they're like hitting cars and breaking into cars, stealing cars, that type of thing.
Right.
I was like, man, do y'all know like the level of strategy that goes into like doing that,
Right.
not getting caught? not getting killed, like that's high level strategic thinking. I was like, imagine if you took that level of strategic thinking and put that into a business. Like you can run a Fortune 500 company generating millions, billions of dollars. That level of strategic thinking you got, right? So if that's so it's like if you can run a game, right? You can run a multi-million dollar business. So a question I one question that I get a lot is like, bro, like what skills from the streets were transferable into legit business?
Mhm.
And I always say all of them. So like for example, if you're in the streets, like if you're selling drugs, like you got to market. So number one, marketing is a skill. Sales, you got to sell your product. Skill transfers directly over. Branding, like if you in any hood, like you know, such and such got the good. It's gonna cost you a little more. They got it. It's not as good. You go up here on the hill, it's not as good, but you can get more of it, for cheaper. Like that's branding, right? So it's like if you buy from Kmart, people gonna be like, well, if you buy some shoes from Kmart, in school, you're gonna get roasted. Because they automatically be like, well, that's not high quality. But if you go buy some shoes from Louis Vuitton, even if they just look like Louis Vuitton, you got them from the flea market, people gonna automatically think they're more valuable. Like literally, that's all branding. You obviously gotta know your numbers. So like when you selling work in the streets, you breaking it down. You got to put it on the scale. You're like, okay, we got a brick. We need to break this down. We either gonna break this thing down and sell it in $50 slabs, right? Or we're gonna sell weight, right? So you decide what that's because you're like, okay, we got this. We're gonna just sell it in weight. We're gonna sell it, ounce by ounce, and we know we're gonna get X amount of ounces from this, and we're gonna flip it, or we're gonna break this thing down to the bottom, and we're just gonna hit the block and get the most from it. Like that's all analytics and knowing your numbers. Like in legit business, you got to know your analytics and you got to know your numbers. You know what I'm saying? If you're a leader, so like what a guy was interviewing me a couple months ago. And he was like, when you get out the streets, like, because he's, in movies and stuff, he saw people leave the streets and they had to go see their boss and all this type of stuff. He was like, you had to go to them. I'm like, no, when I was in the streets, I was a boss. Like, I was around bosses. Like, I ain't had my other homies who was with me were bosses too. But I ain't owe nobody no money. I ain't had to get permission to lead a game, none of that type of stuff. So I had some leadership abilities. In legitimate business, leadership is a transferable skill. Critical thinking, like in the streets, like the stakes are very high. Like any day, you got to look out for the girls you're kicking it with. They could be trying to set you up. Your homies who kicking it with, they could be trying to set you up. You got the police, you got the jack boys, you got the fed, you got all the different things. So you got to have a high level of strategic think or critical thinking and like how you moving on your feet, right? All of those skills are directly transferable to legitimate business.
It's amazing. Tell me about the sense of fulfillment, right? Because we had those experiences, right? The epigenetic uh, experience, the environment influences the gene, and
Hmm.
we were products of our environment,
Yeah.
right? But you always had a sense of self worth, which to me starts with a sense of self, right? And then all of these transferable skills you've taken in a beautiful way, I might add, right? And you've became a service driven man,
Hmm.
and in a lot of ways, you were service driven and people oriented even back then,
Yeah.
right? But when this came into full fledged fruition and you've created ultimately everything that you did, you became a full fledged service driven man. Talk to me about the sense of fulfillment that you get because this is ultimately a repayment of a karmic debt. The sense of fulfillment you get when you see the people that you work with achieve greatness. And it may not even be with money, but
Yeah.
greatness in any way that we choose to define that.
100%. So I think the beautiful thing is like what we do is like it's a force multiple, right? So it's like and we help a business owner go grow their business and they go out and impact millions of people. We've been able to impact millions of people through the work that we did with that one person. Their whole audience may never know who we are, never know who, and that's fine. But because of that, now, more importantly than that though, this business owner is now able to pour that into their kids, right? And now if we have a present father, because one thing I always typically like to enforce is that my goal isn't to help develop fathers who make a lot of money, but they're so engulfed in the grind that they're not in their kids' life.
Mm,
So now if we got a father who was grinding 24/7 to grow the business, But now because he now has systems, right? Or a mom, same thing, right? But now they have systems where the business can actually run and grow without them. Now they can actually show up to the field trips, right? Now they can, like you said earlier, help with the homework. Now they can be there present with their kids. Now this child shows up at school differently, right? And now this child shows up at school differently, and now they impact their kid, their circle at school differently, right? And now these kids now go home differently. And now the energy that they take back home impacts their household. Now imagine their mom or their dad like something different about my little one. And I feel better now about whatever going on. Now this mom or dad goes to work differently, right? And now they impact somebody at work differently. And now they're feeling better about themselves and they go home and they pour into their kids differently. And then their kids go to school and show up. You see how that plays out? And
Absolutely.
it's like this all came from this client that we were working with that these people don't even know. It's that force multiplier. So it's like the truth. And I was telling the client one day, we'll never be able to, the work we do, we'll never be able to measure true impact of what we do. You know what I'm saying? Because it's literally a force multiplier. And I was talking to I think one of the things I became, because I thought my purpose was to like help people grow businesses, right? And I was telling my son-in-law yesterday, we was talking, and I was doing this series at my church called "Are You Selling for Salvation?" And one of the things I just through that study, I discovered that, my purpose is to help. God created me, and my purpose is to help God fulfill His purpose. That's the whole purpose. So it's like if somebody starts a company and they go out and hire team members, the team members' purpose there is to help fulfill the purpose of the company, right?
Absolutely.
So God created us, I believe, to it sent us from heaven to come into this earthly realm to expand the kingdom of God in the earthly realm, and we take dominion, just like the word says. And it's these 7 domains that we dominate in. One of mine is business, one of mine is education, one of mine is family. I'm like literally in all of them, even government. Not that I want to run for government, but I want to be able to fund the politicians that we want to have, in office.
Yes, sir.
So my purpose is expanding the kingdom through different ways. And that breakdown I did, that ripple effect that I just broke down is an example of, how we do it. If my 5-years show up at school differently, we can't say he doesn't impact the classroom differently and more confident. And they're like,
Absolutely.
wait, when he went to pre-K, his teachers was like, has he been to school before? It was like, nah. And it was like, he's just on top of it. He knows all the sight words. He knows this. He knows this. And it was because I was gifted with the ability, me and my wife, was to be home and to like
Pour into him.
pour into him
Absolutely.
and get him around other solid brothers and solid women, pour into him as well. So he showing up confident and we'll continue to reaffirm his identity. It's like my 10-year-old, my 12-year-old, my adult daughter, adult son. And the girls, we don't get it perfect. We still learn. I tell my kids all the time, I'm still figuring this thing out. I don't got it. I had to apologize to my 22-year-old the other day. I'm like, hey man, wherever I dropped the ball at throughout your life, I apologize. Like, I own it. I was like, I ain't have it all figured out then, and I don't got it all figured out now. I was like, what we can agree or disagree on is if we're gonna figure this thing out together or not. Are you willing to do that? If so, let's do it. Because I don't got it figured out. I don't got all the answers. But now he gets to show up at work differently, see things differently, and now it just creates this ripple effect. That's why what you do with your show, it's a force multiplier. You bring guests on, no matter 10 people watch this thing. That's 10 potential new families, 10 potential new communities, 10 potential new states, 10 potential, and it's a ripple effect. Somebody might be 10 years from now. Like I still listen to Dr. Miles Monroe today. I think Dr. Miles Monroe died 10 years ago, I think. But I still listen to some of his sermons and some of his information because of content that was captured 30 years ago.
Right.
It's a force multiplier.
That's incredibly impactful, man.
Yeah.
Um, we alluded to it earlier, but I really want to term it as such. And we talked about it as it pertained to sphere of influence in our environment. But from a business standpoint, you've already given us so many Jews. Overcoming objections. I want to
Yeah,
term it as that,
yeah,
right? So you can really school the viewership.
for sure.
The overall belief in oneself. And you call it on Instagram and you mentioned it earlier, the psychology of sales.
hmm So overcoming objections. So I think one big thing is so one of the shows, one of the things me and my wife like to do is watch. We like Law and Order, SVU specifically.
Gotcha.
And I don't know why I like law shows. I just finished Matlock. Matlock has a new series, a more updated Matlock. It's a lady,
Okay.
and so it's a law show. And I watch Suits, like the whole thing. I binge watched the whole joint. And when they're in court, let's say I'm the defendant. I'm the defendant. We got our attorneys and so forth. And let's say you're an attorney, and you go up there and say something. And I'm the defense, and you're like, you say something as an attorney, and I'm like, objection. It typically means you broke something. I disagree or whatever. I disagree with how you're going about doing this, right? So I show business owners, it's like, if you're doing marketing correctly, and I ask my clients, I'm like, how many of you have got on the phone with people and you told them your offer and what you do,
Mhm.
and they were like, nah, I don't want that. And they were like, well, never really. I'm like, what do they say? And they say, well, I don't got the money. Um, I need to speak to my spouse. Let me think about it. Let me pray about it. Some kind of form of whatever, not doing it. And I'm like, those aren't objections. Those are just conditions. So now if we address those conditions, so like, well, I don't got the money. But that's a condition, right? What do you mean you don't got the money? Tell me more about that. Well, it's 25, you said it's $25,000. I just don't got $25,000, to get started. All right, cool. So you're basically saying that, let me just make sure I'm hearing you correctly. You want to do this. This sounds like it will help you and you want to do it. The only thing that's stopping you from moving forward right now is not, you feel like you believe you don't have the 25,000 to put down all at one time right now. Is that right? And like, well, yes. I'm like, okay, great. Well, if we could get creative with that and figure out how to get you started without having to put the whole 25,000 down today, would you be open to get creative? And they say, sure. Now we've addressed this condition
Right.
of them not seeing, they might have the whole 25,000, but they're just like, I've never just paid 25,000 at one time. So they're like, just the idea, because again, especially they look at money as their security, like we talked about earlier. They're like, the idea of me having 25,000 leave my account at one time, it attacks my sense of security.
Right.
So my best reply to this is I don't got it, I can't do it. So now we agree. Well, that's a condition. Let's talk about that and then see what's what. But it wasn't an objection. It wasn't, I don't want this. Now, if they say, well, I don't want this, blah, blah, then trying to convince somebody to buy something they don't want or they don't need, I don't subscribe to that at all. I got to let them go. If they don't want it, they don't feel like they need, cool. Part ways. Fiduciary, you mentioned fiduciary responsibility. Fiduciary, you can't sell nobody something that's in your best interest. You can only sell them something that's in their best interest.
Right.
So it's like, if that's the case, but if it's like, I need to speak to my spouse, that's not an objection. That's a condition. All right, cool. Let me ask you this. Is this, are you saying you're in and you ready to do this? You just need to bring your wife up to speed and let her know what you're doing? Or do you need to legit get her permission for you to actually move forward? Let's figure out what the real thing is, right? And outside of that, and then it's like, well, no, I just need to bring them up to speed and let them know what I'm doing, or get them, or we make decisions together. So you want to do this 100%? Oh, absolutely, cool. Now you see the house of benefits? Yes, 100%. If your wife says no, then do you just not do it, even though you know this is a solution? Then they're like, well, now they get to think that, well, if my wife says I can't do this, and she don't give me permission to do it, do I then just keep my problem? We just adjust the condition. But these aren't objections, these are just conditions. And sometimes it's just conditions of the mind, right? That's why the brain is so powerful. Let's all right, cool, I heard you. So let's talk to this together so I can just make sure I understand you correctly. And we that's where consultative selling comes in. This ain't forceful, pushy sales tactics. It's legit just questions.
It's amazing, man. I mean, I'm telling you, this is a wealth of knowledge here, and I
Appreciate it.
appreciate it.
For sure.
The tenets for you, the tenets of family and father.
Sure.
What is that to you?
It's everything, man. It's everything. I don't see my so like a question my boy Julian asked me one day. He was like, "Hey man, when you do your spiritual content," he was like, "What's your rhythm?" He was like, "Do you create like some spiritual type content and then you do business? Or like what's your rhythm?" I'm like, they're all the same to me. It's like business is very spiritual. Like you come up with you have an idea that doesn't exist in the physical, and then you bring that thing to the physical. Like you had an idea for this podcast. I don't know how the idea came, but it didn't exist. It was in the unseen realm. And you had the audacity to move forward with it to bring it from the physical plane, I mean the spiritual plane, and bring it into the physical plane. Like that's entrepreneurship. It don't get more spiritual than that, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's one element. I'm like, if I teach business and don't tie that in, I'm cheating the people. I'm showing them how to bake a cake, but I'm not sharing them this key ingredient. Like people are like, well, you shouldn't talk about Jesus and stuff like that. And why not? That's a key ingredient for this cake. This cake that you saying you want me to teach you, that you want to teach you how to bake. That's the key ingredient. My wife is a key ingredient. Like without my wife, I know I wouldn't be as focused as I am because I know what my vices were when I was like in the streets and single and doing my thing, right? Um, my kids keep me grounded, keep me focused, keep me, you know what I'm saying? So those are key ingredients. So I got to talk about all that. I can't just be like, hey, if you want to make more money, here's how you do ads, or here's how you sell, here's how you do. It's like, no, that's like 10% of it. It's these other things, that make up the whole pie, right? And I didn't grow up in like a tight knit family, right? So I'm creating, what I didn't have, and I talk about it because we can't talk about building wealth without talking about building the family. Because if you build all this wealth and when you're no longer here in the physical, where does it all go?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I was talking to a younger guy at the gym the other day. He's 21. He was like, man, I ain't getting married, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, when I was your age, I said the same thing too. Right? I was like, I wasn't getting married till I was 60. But I'm like, if you don't have a family and like what are you building? What are you like? Like, cause all your friends and all that, like these are folks who in most cases don't really rock with you like for real anyway. They rock with you based on what you do and what you bring. And once you can't bring that no more, who really rocks with you? Typically, like legit family, just relatives. All relatives aren't family. So some of my family aren't my blood family, but they're more family than some of my blood relatives, right? So I think us being careful of that, right? And then being intentional, like it's my family above business. And one of the reasons that I typically don't do like podcasts on Saturday. That's why my schedule is set up that way. Because typically on Saturdays and stuff like that, I'm the fam, right? Or I'm traveling or, those type of things. And I don't want to, there's been seasons of my life where I just kind of let it all spill over. I let the business come first. And I was building my life around the business versus building the business around my life. And it's unhealthy. And then your kids don't care how much money you're making. All they remember when they get older is that you was never there. Yeah, you bought them all the things. They had all the J's. You did all the things, right? You just put a check, but you weren't never there. So, who cares?
Absolutely. And then lastly, champ, being legacy minded. What is your legacy?
My legacy. So 100 years. I was thinking about this. So 100 years from now, because so let me step back. So I believe that legacy is like what you're creating. What you create when you're here, not what you leave when you're gone. Right. So my legacy is impact. When anybody who knows me is authenticity and impact. I want to sow something into any conversation, any engagement. I'm always looking for how can I give, how can I sow, how can I make a connection based on what you're doing, what are you looking to do, and I want to impact, even if it's just a word, or even if it's just a, hey, what's up, King? Just speaking in passing. It don't gotta be deep, right? It don't gotta be, hey, oh, see somebody coming, holding the door for them. Appreciate it. That's impact. Like you don't know what that could have totally changed somebody's day just from you speaking. But that can have massive impact. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's what it is, impact. And then 100 years from now, we led with it is transforming the education system.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
Well, I can honestly say that I've certainly been impacted today based
I
on this
appreciate it.
incredibly fruitful conversation. I learned so much, man, and I'm extremely indebted and appreciative of your time and intellect,
For
man.
sure. I appreciate it, man. Likewise, man.
You got anything you want to shout out?
Only thing I would say is so if you're a business owner, you're watching this, we have a site called scalemadeeasy.com. Scalemadeeasy.com. We got tons of resources over there for business owners who are looking to grow and scale. I would say one of the biggest takeaway, well, one of the thing I want to share is like right now we live in the best time in the history of the world to be alive. Right? Like legit. Never in the history of the world did we have podcasts, live, all the tools, AI, the whole 9 yards. The mistake is that consumerism, like you talked about earlier, is just at an all-time rate as well. And it's more consumerism and less production. So what I would look at in this time that we live in, which is the best time in the history of the world to be alive, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, we can sit back and be like, this time came and I took advantage of it. And because of it, this is my family and this is what we've been able to create or will be the impact we've been able to have. Or we'll be able to say, this period of time happened. And because I was just sitting around, distracted, drifting, just consuming, I missed out on it and I didn't capitalize on it. And this is what my family got to have. But the beautiful thing is that the playing field has been leveled. Can't say it was race. We're oppressed, all these different things. We can literally be like, we got access to technology. We got access to the books. Like our ancestors couldn't read. They wouldn't let them read because if you could read, you can free yourself. We got access to all the information, an abundance of information. And so you get to decide what is it, that you're going to create. And I love the title of your show. It's literally you versus you.
My man, Marquel, bottom of my heart,
Hey,
man.
man.
I appreciate you,
For sure.
bro.
Likewise.
Take an aim. It's important to take aim at a target. We have to overcome our limited belief system so that we can ultimately become who and what we're destined to become. Shout out to my brother Cash. He told me a long time ago, there's somebody somewhere right now that can't do what they need to do because you're not doing what you need to do. And that always stuck with me. Listen, if you found value here, and it's my sincere hope that you did, then please comment, like, subscribe, follow the You versus You podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And keep checking me out, and we'll keep busting this thing down. Peace. My man,
Hey, man.
that was hard.
I'm so good now, I feel good now. The baggage put down, just let me live. Just let me live. Now my mind's clear. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you.